Welcome back. Now, in case you haven't noticed, it is another Wednesday. And that means we've got AM Biz brought to you by EcoBank, the Pan-African bank. So a senior partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, George Kwetia, says that tax non-compliance can be partly blamed on government. He adds that it will not be fair for government to expect people to pay taxes when they fail to pay contractors. This is what he said to George Riafe at Joy Business's IntelliTax event, sponsored by PwC.
We are in an economy where the informal sector is a very significant sector. It's unfortunate that you have a significant informal sector which is driven by these SMEs. But incidentally, our laws do not necessarily reflect the industry performance or the sector performance. We know when it comes to payment, how long it takes for an average businessman who, if that person doesn't have the financial muscle, will be able to survive over a term period where on average, people are paid well in excess of 3 months. When it even comes to government projects, at times it runs into years. So if you have a tax system which targets the tax point, which comes earlier than the person receiving his money or his income, which necessarily becomes the basis for which that person uses in paying the taxes, then to some extent, I don't think when it comes to the canons of taxation and you're talking about fairness, you're being fair to the person. When you obviously know that the person hasn't been paid, but then you're making a demand that come and pay, it obviously means that the person will have to go and borrow to pay taxes. And I don't think that is the intent. You want to pay taxes when you've made the money. If for one reason or the other, the person is accounting on accrual basis and therefore it serves as a basis of taxation, or there's a delayed payment and the person is cash strapped, the person is already suffering a working capital challenge, let alone to cough up to pay taxes out of a borrowing. So obviously, I think that's a challenge. And sooner than later, when people cannot survive it, the best thing they do is to go undercover.
But what has happened, because I knew that there have been several tax reforms and coming to appreciate the tax laws themselves, there have been several engagements on how to reform these tax laws to make it more responsive to the business community. Why have all these reformation not gone in a long way to address that problem? And today we are still having that problem, people complaining about the obligations, the withholding tax, and it is still a problem.
There's this issue I call, let me put it into two. From the taxpayer's point of view, there's this issue I call dynamic tension. What is dynamic tension? People who do not pay their tax get to a certain point in time that they will want to honor their tax obligations. Incidentally, they find themselves in a cultural milieu where the general populace is not paying the taxes. So the guy now wants to go and pay his tax, but then colleagues and let me say the community in which the person is says, no, if you go, you're going to expose yourself. Then the guy is under some tension as to, do I listen to my group or do I do what is right? Clearly, the person knows his obligation and knows his responsibility is to do what is right. But then the society or the system in which the person is in pulls the person back. So you end up by the person not doing anything about it. There's this issue too we're having from the GI race angle, where I would say transformation fatigue, we felt, like you rightly pointed out, there have been several recommendations, suggestions, policy changes, blah, blah, blah. And you watch the attitude of the average taxman, he still does things the same old way. Because at the end of the day, the guy is so fatigued of the various policy initiatives. Every government that comes on board comes up with something else. Here, day in and day out, laws are being changed. When they realize that they have challenges with the law and they even make recommendations, nothing is done about it. Where something is even going to be done about it, it's not done in full and those things. And then the guy becomes aloof. They don't even want to do it. And therefore, one, you have this fatigue on the part of the official not wanting to do his work well. Not that they don't want to do, but they do it the same old way, irrespective of the policy changes. And then you also have people who willing to do the right thing, but because of the significant large informal sector in which they are held back because nobody approves of that behavior. Like, if you go and do it, you are going to expose us. Yeah. Let's all be united. Let's stay away. After all, the taxman hasn't come to bother anybody. And because the taxman himself is not also enforcing compliance, then they stay in that comfort zone and will never come and pay their taxes.
So, how are these challenges, again, impacting on, at the end of the day, the payment of taxes and meeting obligations? Because, again, if I'm going to struggle to pay my taxes, some are saying that let me just go under. And that, at the end of the day, is going to hit on government numbers. So if I'm a company, I'll say bottom line.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, what you're saying is what would make a good response from the taxpayer. And what we're saying is that there are a whole lot of things which do not make people want to pay their tax, right from political, economic, social, whatever. You may have instances where the taxman has even done his work. He's assessed somebody to tax. The person is politically connected, gives a phone call, somebody is watching over the shoulder of another person, then nothing is done. We have also instances where, even as a nation, we have this culture, and George, you will confirm this, when laws are even passed, you see sectors that are affected lobby, they always argue, we have not been educated, we were not pulled into it, we are not part of it. They keep on arguing and dragging, and these laws never get implemented. So obviously, when we have these challenges in our economy, well, you know, the taxman will sit back and say, if I look at issues on economics, he passes by, he knows this woman or whatever selling something is not paying taxes. But obviously, he's not going to go there and ask the guy, can you show me your tax payment? Meanwhile, he's a tax official, but he will pass by. He knows his next door neighbor is running a guest house or whatever. He never goes to ask anything. Why? Because he will tell you at the end of the day that if he is to use a government machinery, the cost of collection is too high. Because to drive a team to a Makola woman or a watch seller and go and demand payment of taxes and those things, at the end of the day, the guy is going to pay a piddle amount, which is based on installment. And therefore, you realize that when you do any cost-benefit analysis, it doesn't become attractive for the informal sector to be chased after. And I think mine would be, yes, today it may not be economical, but make that sacrifice to get them to start paying, even though you may be losing out on any financial analysis you do in terms of cost benefit. But at the end of the day, once people get into the culture of honoring their tax obligations, when they become big fishes, you do not have that challenge.
But what I get from you that it would have implications on that, because on our tax numbers in terms of everybody complying with it, not because they don't want to pay, not because their businesses are not doing well, but the process itself is cumbersome and it could discourage people.
Correct. And I always say that there are a lot of things we can even do with technology, really. a simple app can be linked to mobile money payments, where under our law, for instance, individuals are not required to withhold. But you and I, George, know that the economy of some individuals are bigger than some companies, right? The business or the wealth some individuals command, the nature of goods and services that they transact in are bigger than some corporate entities. Meanwhile, those individuals get services provided to them, but they don't withhold because the law says as an individual should know. Now we have the 10 numbers. The individual, we have this Momo system, all the telcos support, people receive money here and there. Why can't we have a system of trying to link TIN to mobile numbers? Because in fact, everybody even in the village has a Momo account.
But don't you think that people would be afraid of that, because then the argument to be that you are trying to find a very smart way of taxing mobile money then?
But that is why obviously people, on the average, nobody likes paying taxes anyway. So, but you know that you can ride on the back of a certain technology to make life easier for both the person paying the tax and the person who probably has to charge the tax. We all know that apps would be a very helpful thing to do. So categorize the individuals, get all these high-earning people to get them to be withholding agents for you. And I can assure you that the electricians and all those masons and these things, when they are putting up their structures, the payments they make to them, they will be withholding taxes on it. We have instances where artisans from Togo come in, they do all this POPM, they charge so much, and none of them pay taxes. We have our neighboring brothers coming in, do businesses, nobody withholds on them. And because that's informal sector and they deal with individuals. But once you have a law which is precluding a certain significant number of people from becoming your withholding agent, then you should know that you're losing quite a lot.
And that was Mr. Kotia from PricewaterhouseCoopers speaking to George Riafe, making an interesting point there about government's obligation to the people. And that, of course, was AM Biz, brought to you by the kindness of EcoBank, the Pan-African Bank. Well, guess what? We've got a lot to talk about. And Mr. Murtala Mohammed joins us alongside the Deputy Minister for Information, Pius Hajide. And they're going to get into it with Roland Walker right after these messages.